Welcome to Sober on Purpose, the show where emotional sobriety and the messy reality of loving someone with addiction meet. We're here to help you discover peace, purpose, and healing through Jesus, no matter how chaotic life feels.
Welcome, Sober on Purpose family. I have Andrew Levander with me, and this continues our teen series. Now, he's got a lot more experience than that with 25 years in the field, work with celebrity athletes and politicians, spoke with Oprah, Dr. Phil, brands. He has so much experience, but the real stuff came from being married to a therapist and then having twins on top of that who have grown up to be wonderful adults. But we were just talking about what you do at work may not be what you bring home all the time. And we'll put this in the show notes, but he is now in running a treatment center, and he was one of the first people to start a treatment center for young ladies. So lots of information around identity, grief, male survivors of sex abuse. We don't ever want to talk about that has happened. And then the book, The Longing of Lonely Children. So, Andrew, thank you so much for taking your time to be here and putting up with my confusion today. Share with us, you know, just what you feel is most important for parents to understand when teens are either dabbling with or beginning to deal with addictive behaviors.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. And that's just one of the hardest questions, is to know what to say when you don't know what to say. And for a parent trying to balance, how do I draw my children near me without annoying them? Why am I so afraid of annoying them? And we get locked in our heads. I'd like to think all of us do, but that just helps me feel better. So it's not just me. I think some of the most important things to know as a parent is it's not only okay, but I think it's foundational in having a family to identify what the family values. And first learning how to have conversations about family values. And I find that it's a lot easier, both in counseling with families that I do and my own. It's been a lot easier being able to come from a place of, as an example, remember, girls, when we were talking about what your mom and I have come to value, or what we thought about in preparing to bring you into the world, and the values that we hoped to pass on to you. Well, what we're talking about right now, drugs or alcohol or experimentation, was a big topic, and we talked about it for years, and we still talk about it. I think it creates a little bit of a buffer, and it allows us not to come from that one up position of, because I'm the parent and you're the child and I said so. And then again, it's such a delicate balance. If we are in this parenting business to be liked and valued and needed by our children, we are going to parent differently than if we are in the parenting business to raise awesome adults. And it's really, we come to our marriages and or being a parent with a whole bag of who we are and who we wanted to be. And we weren't born with a manual that said, when your kids start experimenting, turn to chapter 4. I think someone should write that manual.
Yes.
But as far as I know, so far it does not exist. And because there's a lot of what feel like competing interests.
Absolutely. And so wow, you just nailed me. I walked into marriage and I walked into raising kids going, this is going to be fun. And I didn't think about what values I really wanted. So let's back up to that track again. How does a family even, I call it foreign countries. When you come from your foreign country, which is your family, and your husband or wife comes from their foreign country, which is their family, and then we join together, maybe we haven't even sorted out the values of our family of origin. Do we sit at the table and eat, or do we sit in front of the TV? What does that look like? How, when you're in possible crisis, how do you begin to take the step back and go, let's have a conversation about family values?
Well, that's the really tough part. If we find ourselves in the midst of a crisis, asking ourselves the prerequisite question of what are our values and how do we talk about them, we're going to stumble because we don't know how to have that conversation yet. And so I don't think that it's too late to start at any time, but ideally we would get started early on. And to be honest, my wife and I, we met in grad school, and even to therapists, we didn't have this conversation. And I can actually remember my aunt saying that we should.
Right.
And then I think I remember the defiant part of me thinking, I got this.
I'm a therapist. I know.
Exactly. And that's a whole different topic, but I wish I knew then. I wish I felt then the way that I do now, which is the importance of valuing elders in our lives, which speaks to a value that my wife and I did ultimately come to, and that is respect and tradition. We came up with 8. If it's okay, I can just quickly go through the 8.
I would love it.
That
Yes.
my wife Jenny and I came up with. Respect, communication, support, tradition, responsibility, love and affection, integrity, and education.
Beautiful.
Those were the 8, I suppose, pillars. Just I guess a little detour, but I think speaks to this in the occupational part of my life, in running a large luxury treatment center with my, we have a lot of staff members here who have the hardest job, and that is to keep people alive in early recovery, detox, residential. And we have a set of values that are posted. The company has values that are posted in the different houses that we have. And if I can approach a staff member from a place of company value, I am almost assured that conversation will be more tolerated by the employee than if I come from a place of, I'm the boss and you messed up and I need you to come and see me at 4.
Absolutely.
So I just, I can't highlight the importance of doing it early, having these conversations early, and wherever possible, even if it's a stretch, wherever possible, coming from that place of, I wanted to talk with you when you got, I thought about talking to you today when you got home from school, because as a family, we had made this agreement, and I'm concerned that agreement isn't being honored. And I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Using words like agreement tends to go over better than you broke a rule or you're grounded or so I think the benefit of that, and I genuinely mean this, having a conversation about making and keeping agreements and commitments is really a lifelong skill that we want to pass on to our children anyways.
That's
so
true. Yeah. So to tease that out, it's my understanding is these things are often unsaid. that it's expected, but it's unsaid. So if I'm a
Mhm.
child in the family and maybe the parent has goofed up or not done what's in agreement with the family, but we can come back and have the conversation. What kind of lesson? What kind of lesson am I learning right there? So I can hear some people in my audience scratching their head and going, okay, I know I have values. I know my husband has values. How do we even start the conversation between the two of us?
Well, you just talked about 2 out of the 3, it's not really people, but the 3 components of any relationship. There's, like in my case, there's my needs, and then there's my wife's needs, and then there's the needs of the marriage itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of that in terms of your question, how do we even have a conversation about, will you ask that question again?
Sure. So I have values. My
Oh,
spouse has values. How do we even begin to
what are
have
our
that
shared
conversation?
values?
What are our shared values?
And so, um, I think that that's gonna be a little easier launching pad, um, in co-developing. We're like, hopefully we're co-parenting anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So why not co-develop, our family's values? All of our values don't have to align. I think we're better off when they do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we're individuals, first. But there are some things that are not negotiable to both my wife and me,
Mm-hmm.
that it's just the way we are in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And, um, I think it's helped us raise really great grown-ups. I can't believe they're 28. Um, but, um, they're really, amazing people. Um, and my wife and I were terrified of screwing this up
Yeah, I hear you on that
because we
one.
were destined to. Um, but that was one of our values, is to, and maybe it was a little different or easier because we are clinicians, and when you go to grad school, we're required to do our own therapy to know what it's like. And um, so we had already done some of our personal work. There's
Mm,
so many people, probably more than not, who don't do the work,
mm-hmm.
before they get married.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and and we just inevitably bring our individual problems into the marriage with us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, I mean, this conversation is, there's probably not a more important one, and that is, how do 2 people in love talk with each other?
Mm-hmm.
And even bigger than that, how do 2 people in love talk to each other when there are little people now
Yes.
involved?
So I can hear the wheels spinning in. Okay, you're telling me I need to talk to my spouse about values. I think we got that. But how are you going to help my kid? I'm sure you hear this all the time. How are you going to help my kid? How do you talk to the parents and say, I'm really here to help you and your kid. I need you to do some processing too. How do
Yeah,
you look them in the eye and encourage them, because you can't make them, encourage them that their kid is acting out this way partially because of the soil that they've been raised in?
yeah, that's a great point. And just like, the dog whisperer Cesar Millan,
Mhm.
um, his show really is about, pet owner education, not the training of pets. And when the person is different, their pet will be different. And I'm not comparing us to our pets. I mean, I do love dogs, but my point is, in the absence of being able to be self-reflective, it is going to be very difficult for us to come from, a place of honesty and integrity that our kids are going to know, because our kids know if
Mhm.
we're full of it or not. And
They
um,
know better than anybody. I mean,
for
their little
sure,
radar is up there and they know.
yeah. So, I think keeping it. Your question was, okay. So what do I say?
Mhm.
Um, a mother on Monday brought her 16-year-old daughter to my private practice and said, "Are you going to be able to help my daughter?" And I had to respectfully and a little uncomfortably say, "I'm not sure because I don't know what's wrong yet." And she got really angry. I think more sad and helpless maybe. She said, "What's wrong? What's wrong is just look at her. Her clothing, her friends, she's smoking marijuana. What do you mean, what's wrong? We know what's wrong." And I think to your point, that's just what got you in the door, but
Those
it's
are just
not the
symptoms.
problem.
Yeah.
And so that's the harder work when parents realize that this isn't just about dropping your kid off for an hour of therapy, that family problems require family solutions. It is, well, it would be equivalent to a mathematical equation. It's science. It's just the way things work. Marital problems require marital solutions. Family problems require it's not just about, attend to my kid. So hopefully the development of the relationship can get to a place where it's solid enough for the people in the family to be able to tolerate, just on a simple level, tolerate the questions. And one of the hardest questions I ask is there anything that you can think of, mom or dad, that makes it difficult for your son or daughter to want to talk to you?
That's some reflection right there. So 50% of the time they don't know, 70% of the time they don't know.
Oh, I would say in the 90s, parents who are concerned enough about what's going on in their family to make an appointment in the first place. And because I'm not gonna attack people and I don't blame people, if it's a safe enough place, people will take a risk. And that's exactly the prerequisite to your child talking to you more is, have I created a safe enough place for my kid to answer the questions that I need to ask?
What does a safe place look like for in common? I know all of them are different, but if you had to describe a safe parent, how would they act when their child was trying to talk to them?
Well, if we assume that things in the relationship are not built on a solid foundation to begin with, doing anything different is really like changing the rules on our kids. And changing the rules last minute doesn't tend to go well for anybody. So I think patience, managing our own anxiety and fears, and not projecting or giving all of our worry to our children to manage for us. Because really what we're saying to our kids underneath a lot of conversations is, your behavior scares me. If you stop your behavior, I don't have to feel scared anymore. It's a lot of responsibility to levy on to our kids. I think it's true, but we need to take a piece of that and hold it. And so to answer your question, what does it look like? It looks like being able to be willing to be vulnerable. I think, I don't know, statistically, I'm just going to put it out there. I think most of us will present as angry when we're really terrified. But anger is easier to hold than fear. So, ideally, partners checking in with each other, creating a safe place for one another, and then replicating that with their child. Doing some practice rounds at first. I'm going to say this, and then and then our kid's going to say this, and then you're going to want to run out of the room. Like we can, you know, what's his name? I'm not a sports person, but like John McMahon, and then the defense will go over here, and the offense will. We get a pretty good sense of what it's going to look like.
How? So you were doing it when we joined each other, and I have a little exercise that I do. When your body begins to tense up, and when you're radiating that fear, sadness, worry, all those types of things, you were talking about the vagus nerve. Can you share with us the little exercise that you did just before we got on?
Yeah, I have learned to befriend my nervous system. When I was a drug addict and an alcoholic and really struggling in my life, I didn't want anything to do with thoughts and feelings. And so I just kept myself from them. A lot of my, personal recovery and journey has been not excommunicating the parts of myself that cause me pain. Because I learned, it took me a long time, I learned that we don't die from thoughts and feelings. We sometimes think we might, but we don't.
Yeah.
It's really a matter of tolerating being uncomfortable for a little while, because thoughts and feelings don't last forever either. So the vagus nerve controls our parasympathetic nervous system. All human beings have it. It runs down the sides of our necks, down through our body, down to our feet. And it is responsible for fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And most of your audience, I imagine, can very easily identify what their defense mechanism is or their go-to. Mine is flee. I'm out of here. My wife is fight. So knowing that about each other,
helpful.
There's a lot of, I guess, her chasing me to get me to come back. And so I guess as a side note, these are just good things to know about our partners, what our style is. And because odds are they're not going to match.
So let's pause right here. If she chases you, which a lot of women do, if she chases you, what does that make you want to do?
Well, what we've kind of come to is that she used to get angry with me for leaving at the height of something that needs to be resolved. Part of the reason it needs to be resolved, and this is true for lots of us, is because it's uncomfortable to sit in a place of anxiety and things aren't resolved. So in the beginning, I think it was defensive of me. And I would say, well, it's not my responsibility for you to feel better. I don't feel good right now. So
this is two therapists.
Right. So it's a comedy. We're each doing what we need to do. But one of our shared values is that we will find time to come back together that day. And now we've been together for 25 years. So I don't have to leave anymore. I trust that her intention is not to attack or hurt me or push my buttons that somebody else installed. That's not her motivation. So I don't have to be afraid. And so I don't need the defense mechanisms like I used to. And so when my wife used to look, it happens sometimes still. But if I just throw my hands up and leave, she automatically knows that I am really, really uncomfortable and I'm frightened. And so if she were to follow, if it happens nowadays and she were to come after me, I would just sit down wherever it is that I landed and would just sit down.
And
then,
that's a learned response, because before you learn that, you would continue to flee if she continued to chase.
yeah, and I'd wonder, why are you following me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, my intention here is to get away from you.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back on it, my intention was to get away from the discomfort. I just put it on her.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't her. It was never her.
Mm-hmm.
It was me. So if
She
we're,
noticed there was a problem and she became the problem.
yeah, I suppose, yeah, yeah. And that was just because, and I'm not just pandering here, there are some things that women are just better at. Um, and um, it's great when, I suppose, men are willing to learn something new, because it wasn't working.
No, it wasn't. Well, it certainly wasn't resolving the problem or the tension. You were just escaping. But when you sat down, did she pull up? Did she learn to pull up and calm herself down? We're going to get back to the vagus nerve, I promise. But did she
Yes,
learn to
yes,
pull up and
yes. Sorry about that.
herself down?
Yes, if I sat down, then that I was, ready, and she never beat me up, like
Mm,
emotionally beat me up at that point.
mm-hmm.
Um, what had to happen, and what I think has to happen in marriages, is for one person, or both people, I suppose, to put a piece of their anger and resentment aside long enough to facilitate a connection. And so what that looked like for me is, my wife would have to not pay attention to the fact that I just ran away again,
Mm-hmm.
but focus on what this is really about. Because as I'm running away, I'm having a shame attack for acting like a
Mm,
child.
mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
if we don't help each other center around the real issue, we're both just in defense mode
Mm-hmm.
and behaving really primitively. And it's not
All
even
you're
what's
not
wrong.
doing is flinging poop at each other at this point. We want to talk about. Okay, let's translate this. We're going to come back to the vagus nerve, but let's
Yeah.
translate this into mom and child. Child is running. What can mom do after she's had her, fear, sadness, whatever? What can she do to come back and say, how can she remake this safe? Once she's screwed up, how can she begin to teach this child that there can be safety here?
There, in 25 years as being a therapist, there's a phrase, and 3/4 of my career has been with adolescents. So I really feel like, I get adolescents. Uh, and some of the most comforting words to a child is, "I'm sorry." Um, for some people, it is very difficult to say. And people go to battle over, well, I'm not going to apologize.
Yeah.
And, you know, uh, my guess is that's when people are calling me, because it's
Mm.
gotten to a level where they can't do it without, like, a referee
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to kind of parse out what is really going on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to use an exaggerated example, this mother brought her child. I specialize in self-injury. Um, what's wrong to the mother is that my daughter won't stop or can't stop cutting herself.
Mm-hmm.
It's very clear. It's terrifying,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not what's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's a risk every time I have to take to say, I hear you and this is terrifying. It's just what got you here today. Um, this is going to take a little time. Can we agree? Which gets us back to the, what can a parent do if they have messed up? The parent can say, I'm sorry for how I behaved. And if nothing else, it models to the child that it's okay to say that.
Mm.
Because as parents, we've wanted to hear that 1,000 times for our
From
children.
them, yes, we have.
So if no one's ever modeled that it's okay to say that,
Right.
really, we shouldn't be surprised that our kids can't.
Yeah.
So we need to own our stuff, and that requires being vulnerable. And
you said it earlier, dealing with that shame. This is not the mother I wanted to be. I didn't want to lose my cool over the dishes in the sink not being put in the dishwasher. In the scheme of things, losing your relationship over that is ridiculous.
And that's an amazing thing to bring up, because now what's happening is the mom is back to her role as daughter, and the daughter, and the real daughter in this situation is all alone.
So there's an abandonment there that we didn't, as moms, we didn't intend that at all.
Because
At
mom's
all.
attending to herself in that moment. So, I mean, we have to figure out how to make peace with ourselves before we go try to make peace with somebody else.
And we've swung back to the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve runs here.
Yeah. It controls what we have no control over. But what's beautiful about knowing about vagus nerve and regulating our own emotions is that we can do something for ourselves once it's been tripped or turned on.
Mm-hmm.
And I was late for our call today because I literally was in the kitchen, and I had grabbed an ice cube, and that's just what I do. I hold an ice cube on my neck,
Mm-hmm.
and it's less than 10 seconds, and I can breathe again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's brilliant because I don't need permission. I don't need any help. It doesn't cost anything, and it's always available somewhere.
Yeah. Can I share mine?
Sure.
So I worked with a fabulous woman who it's just above your belly button, and all of us that are human have it. And you do 3 presses and 3 deep breaths. And then she says to ask the question, how am I feeling in my body now? But you don't answer it. The body answers it. And the body can begin to release some of that tension. And then her next thing is to hum. So the humming triggers the vagus nerve from
Mm-hmm.
the roof of the mouth. And then you just hum. And it can be a tuneless, just hum. And like you said, it's free. You can do it anywhere. You can release all that stuff. And you don't have to have any answers. That's what I really like about the process. The ice cube. I don't have to have answers on why this happened. It just happened.
Mm-hmm.
So how would the mom who is, the one who said, well, can you help my daughter? And you said, I don't know yet. Or the other one, that was so fearful about the cutting. How can she learn to employ those techniques to be what I would guess more the person she wants to be?
Well, I mean, if you're not a therapist, you should be one, because that is such a beautiful sentiment that I wish I'm now going to use. I think that if another human being in the midst of our meltdown were to somehow relate to us, that right now there's no need to push ourselves around for not being good enough, that for the universe is giving us an opportunity to be the parent that we've always wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to me. And there's going to be tremendous positive payoff for everyone who loves me and who's around me if I can pull this off. And I watch people do it every day. Go from being a fentanyl addict and overdosing and being revived with Narcan on Tuesday, sitting in a therapy session on Thursday, talking about the person that they want to be. So, I mean, in recovery, we call that a God shot. That for whatever reason, it wasn't your time. How would you like to use our time
Right.
together? And um, I also find that for some reason, so many of us think that we have to do all this alone.
Mm.
We have to find these solutions, and that then life is a struggle, and it means more if it's a struggle. And I don't know about any of that.
Yeah.
I do trust that we are not designed to be alone.
Mhm.
We're just not. Um, some of us have spent decades pushing people away, or more accurately, keeping ourselves safe by keeping other people um, distant from us.
Mm.
Um, I think there's a difference in that subtlety. Um, when we can calm down and remind ourselves that all of those monsters that used to chase us when we were younger, they're nowhere to be found now. But my wife and I were just talking about this morning. Um, um, the coping mechanisms, I can't think of the author of this, the the coping mechanisms that I use to survive childhood are making my adult life unmanageable.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So we need to get current. Um, and I see every day that lots of us are just not current. We still are running from what we used to run from.
And
And
that's
it's not to blame ourselves, it's how our brains have been wired.
mm. Mhm.
We need some tweaking. Um, and we do that by going and grabbing an ice cube or pressing above our belly buttons, or just in my morning AA meetings, I hear this every day. It used to annoy me because I didn't understand it. Um, Somebody inevitably will say, the only thing I have to do is the next right thing.
Mhm.
Like, it's so simple.
Yes. Yes. Can I add one to that?
Sure.
How can I help it go right? How can I help it go better? The only thing I need to do is the next right thing. How can I help it go better? How can I help it go right, instead of making either a neutral choice or a negative choice, which is where our brains tend to go, right? And
Mhm.
that's the thing when I look at a situation of, I may have resentments, I may have angers, fears, sadness, all those types of things. What would help it go in the way that makes it better for me, for everybody, for all that's going on, instead of stomping in and being the selfish person that I can be, who doesn't like a messy kitchen? I just don't like it. But me
Yeah,
being angry about it does not help it go right. So as we're
such a great point. It's a natural follow-up thought after the first part. I just need to do the next right thing. What can I do to make that happen? Or how can I help this process? It just it feels like the natural progression right after that thought.
Yes. And sometimes I know when I was really working, when I was at different state, and that's the other thing we haven't really brought up is, yes, we're responding from childhood triggers, but we can also, we're either growing or dying. There's no in between. We can also get to a point in the relationship where we need to grow again, and they need to grow again, and we need to grow again. It doesn't stop. And that I think came apparent to me when I still have older teenagers, but when they first started into teenagerhood, I caught myself going, okay, one of us has to be the adult here, and I think it's me. And so how do I do that? Because I don't know how many of you remember back to high school, but all the insecurities, all the fears, all the misunderstandings, all the I don't know who I am. Well, it's age appropriate for my young teenage boys to do that, right? but it's
Mhm.
not age appropriate for their mother to get sucked in and be part of that. So that was the next, I'd worked through the childhood stuff, but that was the next phase of, okay, wait a minute. Who's the adult? Who has the keys, the credit cards, the bank accounts, life insurance? Who has all this? And why am I behaving like I don't?
Yeah, because fear is a paralyzer, or self-doubt. I'm in this stage of my life. I'm 55 now, and I think more than ever that so much of my stuff is rooted in a place of fear. And right or wrong, that doesn't matter to me. But it has helped me um, feel like I understand it a little bit more. Because when I don't understand something, my natural inclination is to avoid it, push it away, run away from it. So I really just tried to get to a place of, well, what is that thing that happens to me? Because it doesn't
Mm.
feel good.
Mhm.
Um, and then that, I think, speaks to that those old coping mechanisms of mine are not designed to be brought into adulthood.
Yeah, it doesn't work, because you know
No.
what? The bills are still gonna find you, the responsibilities are still gonna find you, and the life that you want is not running from all those responsibilities. It's part of being an adult. So, if you're talking, you gave us 2 great scenarios of moms really at a high stress point. If there's a mom listening today and she's at a super high stress point with one of her kiddos, what could she do today that would bring her back into some sense of safety?
Um, well, I can tell you what I do, and that is remind myself that I don't have to come up with the perfect thing to say. I take the pressure off. It's
Mhm.
okay not to know. I say that to my daughters to this day.
Mhm.
I wish that I knew what to say right now, but I don't, and I'm here.
That's
That's it.
perfect. Can you say that one more time?
I don't know the right thing to say, but I'm here.
Yes.
Or um, I I know that you're hurting. I'm sorry you're in pain. Um, you mentioned this earlier. Um, if my daughters or my wife or anybody that I care about is in pain, they're not saying, fix me. They're just in pain. So I've really had to learn to be less arrogant um,
Mm.
and not take on somebody else's problem as an opportunity for me to fix something so that I can meet my need to feel valuable,
Mhm.
which I think is underneath so many of the fix-it men in the world.
Mhm.
Um, there's such freedom that comes with um, getting to know ourselves better
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
then not pushing ourselves around for the information that we land upon. Like it was relieving that um, there are certain things that aren't my job that I always thought was my job.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
like if mom isn't happy, she's going to leave us. It became my job to make sure mom was okay. Well, that was a strategy in childhood to keep myself from being abandoned. But I think a really perfect example of what so many of us have experienced to some degree or another, that although that strategy got me out of childhood, it's got no business in my adulthood. It's not needed anymore.
Right. Right.
Um, I guess in large or small part to I don't have abandoning people in my life to where
Mm.
I need to protect myself from that.
Mhm.
And I think that's what I mean by the value and importance of getting current
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
ourselves.
So this childhood wound that created this need to keep mom happy, so you didn't get abandoned, which was crucial I mean, for your life, for your
Crucial.
physical life, crucial,
Mhm.
is not necessary in the adult life because you can choose your relationship. You can choose people that you don't have to worry about that. Or if you run into those people, sheep in or wolves in sheep's clothing or whatever you want to call it, you can say, this is not a relationship I want to continue with, because you have the choice.
Right, because another one of my values is that um, I, I don't allow people to treat me poorly. It's not even really a conversation anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not a rule. It's a term. I
Mm-hmm.
did this weekend a long time ago. Learn to be the man you've always wanted to be. It's life changing. Um, um, and that was one of the things that we were asked to do is, what are your terms? And the 277 other men that I was with had no idea what the person in charge was asking. What do you mean terms?
Right.
What do you mean I'm supposed to decide what is and isn't okay with me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if we're not raised um, with that instinct, or if we're not raised to value um, finding out what's best for us in this world, it's foreign.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's not selfish, because then we can make choices based on it instead of doing the passive aggressive, hiding, running away, getting angry, all those types of things. Andrew, you have brought so much to us, from having the value conversation and creating values for the family, looking at yourself and what it is that's okay and not okay for you, managing that vagus nerve, and some wonderful opportunities for folks to see, hey, I'm not alone. This is a person with over 25 years of experience. You see some really tough cases. Andrew, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, it's been my
Tell
pleasure.
us where we can find you. We'll have the links below, but
Oh,
what
great.
you're doing in your career right now.
Thank you. Well, I opened up, it's called the Encino Detox, or Encino Recovery and Detox Center in Encino, which is about 20 miles outside of Los Angeles, a little secluded little town. And we have a licensed and accredited 12-bed detox residential treatment center for men and women over 18.
Mhm.
Who come to us really wounded and broken and addicted. And I spent, we've been open for 2 years. I spent 23 years dreaming of this place,
Mhm.
um, and literally designed it around everything that I had picked up and learned along the way. And couldn't be happier. And it's just, I guess that mission of mine, just to be of service to people in need,
Absolutely.
but for a much healthier reason
Yes, yes,
than I
yes.
used
That's
to.
a whole nother podcast of when we get in service to try and feed ourselves because we're trying to fix them. Whole nother
Right.
podcast.
So
Andrew,
people can find us at the EncinoDetoxCenter.com. And
fantastic.
it's ENCINO, or 1-833-433-2435.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure.
You, beloved listener, are creative, resourceful, and whole. Do you want to add more purpose to your sober journey? Do you want to make room for the new and make your dreams a reality? Apply today for a dream session. Go to tanyajoya.com. That's TANYAGIOIA.com and apply today. Let's get you dreaming about your new purpose.